Today will be the third in our series of 6 interviews that we'll be doing leading into the Summer Guitar Festivals in BC this year. They'll be held from July 4th to 7th in Kelowna, and then from July 11th to 14th in Vancouver. And you can find out more information about them and how to register at vancouverguitar.org. The early bird registration date has been extended to June 7th, so there's still a few days left to get the discount for both the Okanagan and Vancouver festivals if you're interested. But even if you miss the 7th, you can still register later in the month, space permitting. So again, vancouverguitar.org to get all the festival details. Speaking of festivals, our guest today is Alec Pearson, the founder and director of the Okanagan Guitar Festival. He's performed throughout North America, Spain, Greece, and Colombia, and now he's the guitar professor at the University of British Columbia and chair of the Vancouver Guitar Society. And I actually studied with Alec in my last 2 years of university, and I met him several years before that at a different guitar festival, much like the one that we're going to talk about later today. So, without any more rambling from my part, let's welcome in Alec Pearson. Thanks for coming.
Hey TJ, thanks for having me, and I'm glad to see you doing this series. I think it's super interesting and great work.
You're right. So we're going to start with some personal questions, and we'll move on to some guitar things, and then finally we'll round it off with talking about the festival a bit.
All right.
So just like all the interviews on this channel, we're going to start with the most difficult question first. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. In your opinion, what is the best snack served during intermission at Vancouver Guitar Society concerts?
The best snack served at intermission at Guitar Society concerts. Um, you know, so when Manami was still in charge of doing the reception snacks,
Mhm.
she used to make this baked cheesecake.
Oh, yeah.
So that was my favorite.
Nice.
So it's for people who don't know, I think it's not just Japanese, but it's really popular Japanese recipe. Is it's not like a thick, rich cheesecake that we're mostly familiar with
Mhm.
in North America. It's like a lighter, fluffier baked cheesecake,
Yeah.
and that thing is just so good.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. Well, now it's time for the easy stuff. So, when did you first decide that you wanted to be a professional musician, and how did you go about making that happen?
That's a great question. So, I had I guess I came to music a little bit later than some people who are professionals, but I had the kind of epiphany moment that I wanted to be a professional pretty early on. So I my first instrument was actually the saxophone, and from the time I was in grade five, I think we started concert band a little bit earlier at my school.
Mhm.
And I was always pretty good at like reading sheet music and stuff. I was good at math and kind of the way that the notes work on the paper made sense to me. So picking up guitar, I think I was 14, and it was either 14 or 15. I decided I was going to be a professional
Oh,
musician,
wow.
and I had this like moment. I remember I was sitting at on my staircase at my I grew up with my grandparents, and I sat on the staircase and I had the light coming in, and I was holding the guitar, and I was just like this nice warm feeling, and I was reading a book. The book was actually an idiot's guide to learning
Okay.
classical guitar,
Yeah.
which was, I think it was Frederick Hand or Frederick Nod, but I think it's Frederick Hand, and it was actually a great book. It
Hmm.
was it was really nicely really nicely written out. Like very the through line through it was great, lots of points. And I just remember like playing this and things kind of like clicking and making sense and just thinking like, oh yeah, I could do this for like the rest of my life
Great.
and not regret it. So that's the moment I decided. How I ended up making it happen, is always a bit of a messier story.
Hmm.
But I started teaching probably earlier than I should have. I started teaching when I was about 16 or 17,
Hmm.
so just after a few years of studying, and I liked it. Um, well, there's things about it I liked better than my like previous work, and yeah, I just kept like going down that path. And some things you plan out and then it works out, some things just fall into your lap, some
Yeah.
things you plan out and it doesn't work out.
Hmm. Yeah. And you recently became the professor at the University of British Columbia, so that's really incredible. So it seems like the teaching thing is something that you really gravitated towards.
Yeah, well, not so recently. So I'm 35 now. I started teaching when I was 28.
Mhm.
So I've been there for a while. I've
Really, it feels like it's
graduated a
been.
few students.
I feel like it was just like a year ago that you joined, but I guess that
I
COVID
know.
wormhole.
Yeah, COVID totally just like totally distorted everyone's perception of time. I
Yeah.
remember the first time back doing like in person, watching the auditions and adjudicating juries in
Mhm.
person after the COVID. It's just like this student's like graduating now, and it feels like they just started like
Yeah, yeah,
last year. Like, yeah, it's really crazy.
yeah. What are some of your core philosophies in teaching?
Ah, okay, so I mean, how much time do we have?
We have as much time as you want.
Okay, so I've learned a lot of things about teaching, and it's I think you have to approach it partly as a science and partly as an art, meaning it's like it's a very human thing,
Hmm.
right? So really, the way you approach teaching, there are some things that it's very fundamental and it's kind of rigid. But the way you present that information and the steps you take to explain it, how you present it, how you get the student to experience it, really has to, I think, change and kind of cater to the students.
Hmm.
So that's kind of hard to explain in the question, but my philosophy is really to try to teach simple things very, very well.
Hmm.
So I want students to be able to do very, very simple things with a lot of confidence and to understand the mechanics and why we do it and just feel really good about doing very simple things. And then after that step's achieved, learning how to look at things that are more complicated and break them apart and see like, okay, this complicated thing is like three simple things
Ah,
put
right.
together. And when they can understand that, so it can be very difficult to learn how to break complicated things down into their basic ingredients, but I think starting with having really good fundamentals is very important.
Yeah, for sure. I can really see how that could give somebody the tools they need for after they graduate. Just like that kind of mindset to approach music and difficult tasks and break it down. Do you think that in your most successful students that this is something that they adopt very quickly, or do you think there's other traits that set apart your really, really, really top students? I guess what I'm asking is what kind of things do you see in your students who are succeeding really well under you?
Well, that's so success is a really subjective word, right? So what does it mean to be like a successful student? So, is a successful student someone who plays really well? Is a successful student someone who engages with their community really well? Is a successful student someone who is doing something unique and sets them apart from the crowd around them really well? Is a successful student someone who maybe doesn't have any of those things, but is progressing really quickly
Hmm.
and picking them up? But they're not really at a professional level in any of those areas. So maybe a successful student is someone who enjoys it the most and gets like a lot of satisfaction out of what they're
Sure.
doing, right? So there's a lot of ways to kind of what do you think of as being success?
Hmm.
Um, I think in general, well, that's a lot of stuff. Maybe you can give me a follow-up question and then I can narrow it down
Sure.
from there.
Well, I guess let's define success as the student achieving the kinds of things that they want to achieve. So, are there any particular traits or aspects of personality that you see in students that I guess work well towards the goals that they want to achieve, whatever they may be from all those things that you listed?
Okay. Well, so I will say, in my experience as a student personally, and also as a teacher, one thing most students really struggle with is having clear goals about what it is that they actually want to achieve.
Right.
So it's, not a lot of students have a clear defined path like, I want to learn music so I can do this,
Hmm.
or I want to be like a performer. There's like a lot of students don't have this kind of clear goal. And also myself as a student, I just wanted to learn music and get better.
Yeah.
And, I was like just kind of looking to my professor to like, hey, give me like the next thing that I should be playing and what should I be like listening to? Where should I go? And I would have been more successful as a student if I had really clear goals that I wanted to work towards.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of my students would also be more successful. But I think it's also a very natural part of about being a student to kind of feel this like pressure of like wandering and
Right.
where to reach out. I think uh, the traits that I see with my most successful students are not necessarily really things that are related to music, but I think are more like these interpersonal soft skills.
Hmm.
So students that are really good at communicating, they like reply quick to emails. I don't have to remind them about dates on the calendar. They're self-motivated to take opportunities. So like you would think that some music students would jump at the chance to like perform publicly and get paid a little honorarium, even if
Right.
it's just like a
Yeah.
small honorarium, or like, get some fundraising or something like that. But not all students are able to do it. A lot of them are just kind of hesitant or they're
Hmm.
shy. And so the students that I see that are most successful are the ones that are just kind of willing to step outside of their comfort zone, willing to take those like little risks, and are good at communicating, good at organizing. And some of those things are stuff that musicians are like cliche bad at,
Right. Yeah.
personality traits. So I totally get it. I'm also like myself growing up, I was also very disorganized and messy, but I was able to work at those things and improve with some help of teachers and people around me. And so I think those are kind of traits that breed success in any fields.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
yeah, and we musicians, sometimes we have this feeling like if someone points that out about us, we feel like they're attacking our creativity
Right.
or our artistic spirit or something like that, and we don't want to be like confined and put into a box. But the truth is that we can be good at lots of different things at the same time. And two things can be true. We can be artistic and free and think and act a little bit differently than other people and still be good at like responding to emails and
Yes,
putting things on
that's
the
right.
calendar. So
Yeah. Do you think that these are things that could be incorporated into institutions? Just these important non-musical aspects.
I definitely think institutions are starting to pay more attention to it now. Like, especially we see like a lot more awareness around like mental health
Hmm.
and people like registering how much stress is and how much burden like students are working with. It's a little bit of a tricky thing though, because these skills they should really start to be developed before you're a university student.
Right.
Like the students that don't have these skills, once you hit university, it's like you're kind of in a sink or swim situation.
Hmm.
And like me, you just kind of muddle through being bad at those things and you slowly get better and
Right.
better at it if you can. But it should be like way earlier in life.
Hmm.
Like I think in North America, there's something wrong with our primary
Right.
education. We need to give a lot more like personal responsibility to kids a lot younger.
Hmm. I was thinking with your, I guess, core philosophy of breaking down problems, if you were to have a really main goal to work towards, then that's something that you could break down to steps. So is there is there anything you could see being helpful in guiding your students towards having this goal so that they could go through and break the steps down of how to achieve it compared to more wandering nebulously?
Yes. So there's a couple strategies. Like there's specific strategies you can do to kind of approach like making your vision a reality. And I can talk about that. I think the biggest thing though is just getting involved in something,
Hmm.
even if it's not a thing that you're like super passionate about. I think it's better to like be part of a team, get working on in some community capacity, than to try to like sit back and think like, what is it I want to do? Maybe it's this, maybe it's that. I think once you start doing things, that's when you discover it is
Hmm.
like, oh, now I see like there's a hole here or a niche here,
Yeah.
or oh, I'm good at this, I'm bad at that, right? So I think just being active is like the first step. And once you're in that position, you will learn things from the people around you. You'll get help in places you didn't think it was there. And then you'll that's when you'll start to like create that. But if you already have a vision, I think it's really helpful to write things down. So keeping like a notebook or like a app on your phone, you can write things down. Whatever, you have to find a strategy that works for you.
Hmm.
But having some way of bringing your thoughts into the physical world is really, really important. Then the next thing, and this is like one thing I've really found that helps me, and I still get stuck in this sometimes, but to not let the perfect the what's the phrase, not let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Right. Yeah.
So once you have some kind of idea of like something you want to do, don't look for the perfect way to do it, just start doing a
Hmm.
part of it. So even if it's like the smallest part of it, if we could just get in the habit of like doing little chunks here and there over time, those things make it a reality, where instead we can look at like, okay, so many things that have to be done, and then feel sort of like this paralysis of not wanting to do anything,
Uh-huh.
right? So like organizing this festival, maybe there's a day I know I should contact the venue about this. I don't really want to do that. Okay, but I don't have to let that stop me from doing something else. I can update the website. I can send an email out to one of the performers. And
Hmm.
then maybe the next day I can do the bigger thing or whatever, right? But you just kind of keep hacking away at it. And I think that's the really trick there, is just to do something, just make it happen.
Great. I really, really like that. Speaking of doing things, I'm always super impressed when I watch you perform because the playing is always excellent, but more importantly, like you always I seem to notice like you get shaky hands and the sweats, and in spite of that, you still manage to do exceptional on stage. So, what are some of the strategies that you use to deal with the physical effects of the nerves and overcoming that when you're playing?
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I'm not the most confident performer always. I suffer from a bad habit of not sticking with pieces as long as I should. A lot of the performers I know who are really amazing, sometimes they play these pieces for like 4 or 5, 6 years. I think that's really great. Over the last few years, I've been writing a lot of music and performing those pieces. And so a lot of the compositions I have on YouTube that maybe you are looking at, a lot of those performances are like the second performance or the third
Hmm.
performance of the piece, and the music's not really easy.
Yeah.
Um, I don't really have a strategy other than, all the things that my teachers taught me about trying to be as really well prepared, and just like the two best things for performance anxiety are to be as prepared as possible, and then to perform as much as you can.
Hmm.
So we don't always have enough of either of those, but I try to put myself into situations where I don't shy away
Right.
from. I don't let that like be an excuse to not play for friends or at a social or in a concert. Like I don't feel like prepared. I just do it
Just do
and
it. Right.
hope. Yeah, just do it and hope for the best.
Yeah. That's great. Uh, do you have any rituals that you do before you perform, or maybe on the days leading up to the concert?
Um, so yeah, I definitely have things I like to do and I prefer to do. I try not to think of them as rituals because I don't want to be in the situation where I have to perform and then I didn't have a chance to do my rituals,
Right, like you didn't
right?
get your banana, so now you're gonna fall through your chair.
Yeah, exactly, right? So of course, having a good night's sleep before
Hmm.
is really great. Although sometimes, I've been in this situation where you are in a habit of like not sleeping too
Yeah.
much, and then you have a great sleep the night before, and then like that day you just feel tired now,
Right.
right? You're just like your body's just in rest mode. So sometimes I feel like it's better just to be on edge.
Yeah.
But yeah, that like taking care of your health in general,
Mhm.
I think is really important, and something a lot of musicians neglect. But you have to look at it as more like a long-term strategy.
Yeah.
You can't cram becoming healthier the week before.
Right, right.
Um, yeah, and then I have like certain warm-ups I and technical exercises I like to do on the guitar. And if I'm in a chance that I get to have a good enough stretch of time before the concert to do that, I know it'll be a better performance
Hmm.
than if I don't do it. Yeah, and I do a lot of visualizing with the score, and I need to do more of visualizing the actual performance itself, like in the space
Yeah.
and being up there. But if I do a lot like just closing my eyes and going through the piece, and I know it'll be a much more successful performance if the few days leading up I've had a lot of time to do that, and I know that there's no holes there.
Hmm. Do you find yourself getting any nerves or increased anxiety if you don't get a chance to sit down and warm up and prepare? Or is it something that you've mostly gotten accustomed to just being able to play from any kind of situation?
Yeah. So, I'll tell you a story. When I was studying in Spain,
Hmm.
is in this program with 13 other guitarists. So there's 14 of us in total. And there was a really good friend of mine, um, who he was really, there's lots of really great players in this program. I was just somewhere in the middle
Hmm.
in terms of like caliber. But there was this one guy, he was like, he kind of stood out a little bit from all the others in a special way. And I remember listening to him practice once, and he would just pick up the guitar and play through the piece, just beginning to end, and then just stop. And he wouldn't work on anything in the piece. And then that was his like how he practiced. He would just like play from the beginning to the end.
Right.
And I always of course, I don't teach my students to do that. Like I was always taught, okay, we got to work on this and break it down.
Hmm.
But then, I sat and I kind of thought about it, like philosophically, what he's practicing doing is, you only have one chance to perform.
Yeah.
And sometimes when we're practicing, we pick up the guitar and we don't really do the thing. And then we kind of trick ourselves to thinking like, oh yeah, I have so many chances to work and improve this, right?
Yeah.
So, of course, I still do that in my practice. I sit down and I try things and I repeat things and I do it with different rhythms or whatever. But I started incorporating into my practice this idea of like, okay, I only have like one chance to do the thing I want to do,
Hmm.
and I have to do it the first time I do it.
Yeah.
So maybe it's not the entire piece, like I was listening to my friend, but maybe it's like a run or a passage or a tricky like set of harmonies for the left hand. And I try to approach it in the way like, okay, can I just play this um, the first time?
Hmm.
I only get like one shot, or this is how it is. And I found when I started doing that my confidence with picking up the instrument and just performing and playing something really improved. So I definitely recommend that strategy for everyone.
Great. And actually, research does confirm that too. There's some neuroscience papers that talk exactly about that, just like science codified. So yeah, yeah, I think that's bang on.
Great.
Yeah. One other
Glad that
thing. Oh,
my Greek friend was onto something.
yeah, he was. Yeah, he was way before the times. Yeah, one last thing about performing. Do you have any strategies for quickly adapting to maybe like not perfect sittings, like the chair's the wrong height, or it's too hot, or it's too cold, or the venue's kind of awkwardly set up for performing?
Okay. Um, so I think there's kind of two layers to that. So one is like the first layer is in preparing. So even though it's an unforeseen circumstance, you can still prepare for unforeseen circumstances. So you can practice performing for people, or practicing in different temperature
Hmm.
rooms, and on different height chairs. So you can purposely put yourself into situations in the preparation stage that are not ideal.
Right.
And I think that's really important. Another thing we can do in our preparation is learn to be more flexible with the music. So we all fall into this trap of we have this idea of this is how we want the music to sound, and I'm aiming for this thing. And it's kind of like you're walking a tightrope, you know?
Right.
It's
Yeah.
like if I make one step, I'm gonna fall off. One step in the wrong direction, I'm gonna fall off of this tightrope. You can also practice in a way that you take that tightrope and you kind of widen it out into like a nice wide path.
Hmm.
So we can use rubato and work with different tempos and make ourselves more flexible with the music. And that will help us a lot in those situations so that we can become more adaptable.
Hmm.
When you're in the actual moment, you know, of course, now it's a different thing than preparing. I think it's really helpful just to remind yourself that however the situation goes, it's not the end of the world, right?
Right.
So we can put a lot of our pressure in the moment of like this, we have this kind of, I don't know if it's subconscious is the right word, but this like fear of failure or things not being ideal. And just kind of remind yourself that this is like a very human moment
Hmm.
and people are here, they want to enjoy you succeeding. Yeah, does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, yeah, that's great. A while ago, you were talking about your composing, and actually, at the start of stream today, if anyone was here before we began, we were actually playing Alec's compositions in the background. So, could you tell us a bit about your process for composing and some of the thoughts or inspirations that go into it?
Sure. Yeah, it's also a tricky question because I think it's a little bit different each time.
Hmm.
Um, so, you know, I'm not as strong melodically as I am harmonically. So a lot of the basis for the compositions might be in some kind of harmonic idea,
Hmm.
and other people are the opposite. But I think I don't know where the initial stage comes from. You know,
Right.
you're just like noodling around on the guitar, or you hear something in another piece of music and you're like, oh, I kind of want to do my take on that
Hmm.
idea, right? Or maybe you thought like it could have gone this way or whatever, so you try to do it. And a lot of times when you do that, it ends up being totally something totally different than what
Yeah,
you
right.
thought you wanted to do, but
Hmm.
it's still great, right? Um, but for me, it's like when I start composing, there's like a seed there,
Hmm.
and I'm always trying to. I think of it's kind of like a sculpture. Like I don't sculpt, but this is my image.
Okay.
You have like a block of marble,
Hmm.
and you're trying to chip things away, or maybe like you're working with clay. So it's like you're trying to shape it, and then you're like, oh, this is not. It's kind of distracting. It doesn't really add to the thing I like what my real vision is, and I you try to mold it and kind of bend it and play around. So it's not really like a rigid thing,
Hmm.
and a lot of good composition happens in editing and taking things away. And I'm just always trying to remind myself like, how can I make whatever it is I'm doing with the music more clear to the audience?
Right.
So trying to strip things away, make it less complicated, make it more simple. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I don't know if
So
that's what you're asking.
no, 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 it's great. So, you mentioned like having a block and as a sculpture, and that kind of reminded me of what you were saying before of like your like just do it strategy. So, do you normally get like the entire thing on a page, just like the entire piece from front to back in whatever form, and then you start sculpting it from there, or is it more of a like step by step process, refining one section at a time, or just like the broad strokes and then narrowed in?
Uh, it's I've done both,
Hmm.
and I think it kind of depends on what that like seed is that you start with. So I've sat down and I've written like in the course of a day or two, like 2 or 3 pages of music that basically resemble what the finished project is, and then maybe after that, the time is just spent like tweaking things here. Oh yeah, that harmony is a little bit off,
Hmm.
and you know this rhythm actually makes more sense if it's like that. But it's like basically the same. And then I've also been in the situation where it's like you have this phrase or two that is you're really happy with, and then you just don't know where to go from there.
Right.
Or you write something, you're like, it's just like it's not convincing.
Uh-huh.
Like I think I have to scrap it. And sometimes it takes like weeks or months.
Hmm.
So I find the one thing, if anyone's listening to this that is like wanting to compose, that's really helpful is to always have more than one composition at a time.
Mm.
Because a lot of times when you get stuck on one composition, I find it super helpful just to go work on another one.
Right.
And somewhere in the back of your mind, you'll get the inspiration for the one you got stuck on. Or you'll just come back to it after enough time and it'll be fresh. Or an idea that you really like that it doesn't fit into this composition, you can plug it into the other composition. So
Right.
I'm always working on at least two compositions. And maybe some of them never get finished or, end up being totally different than what I thought. But I always have more than one going on at a time.
Great. Is composing something that you've always been interested in, or is it something that's developed over time for you?
No, actually, composition was something I've always been interested in. It was actually my sort of first love of music.
Oh,
I was
really?
like really, yeah, I was really interested in um, more than like the performer, like creating these sounds and stuff. Like
Hmm.
why do these two notes sound to get so good together? And how come you get this feeling when you hear this chord and that sort of thing. So I first my first kind of serious studies with music. Uh, were to take like theory lessons and try to understand harmony. Um, and then I sort of reached this point where I thought like, okay, even when I'm an old man and I'm like in my 70s, I can write music.
Hmm.
Um, so I have like really my whole life to do it. But as a performer, I think there's this really crucial period in your youth where you can't develop that technique as an older person. Of
Hmm.
course, you can still learn an instrument and get good, but you're never going to be like a professional concert player at a certain age. And I noticed almost all of my favorite composers were in some degree like performers themselves. And I thought like, okay, if there's some kind of secret ingredient here to understanding music that you can only get by being a performer, I
Okay.
gotta like dedicate the first years of my life to this thing. So
Oh, great.
yeah, so as a like very early on, I was really into composition, and then in my undergrad, I was still doing composition classes and composing a bit, but my focus was really on performing.
Hmm.
And then in my master's degree, I was really focused on performing. I did a bit of composing, but it was just kind of more like keeping the back burner
Yeah.
going, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't until COVID where being a performer felt kind of obsolete that I really started getting back into composition.
Hmm. Great. And one final question on composing. Do you think that there's a reverse relationship too, where composing impacts your ability to perform and like gives you new insights into the pieces that you're playing?
Yeah, definitely. So I think there's a lot of different types of performers. And being a performer, being a good performer can mean a lot of different things. So there's in certain ways, there's certain things about performance that I think composing doesn't necessarily help you at all.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of really amazing performers who've never tried to write anything or have no interest in it. So no means do you have to be uh, a composer to be a great performer. But I can say that like when you try to write music, you start to think a lot more about the structure of music, about what makes a phrase like climactic,
Hmm.
about why does do the phrases develop in the way that they do, and it really forces you as a performer also to know your fretboard. So like I'm definitely a lot better at sight reading than I don't want to say a lot of performers because there's great, but a lot of other guitarists, I'm a really good sight reader, and a lot of that has come from trying to compose and actually thinking
Hmm.
about, okay, what is this harmony? Where else can I do this harmony? How
Right.
else can I finger this chord so that I can keep the melody there?
Hmm.
You know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense. Right. Well, all these things take a lot of time. For example, like composing is a huge time investment and practicing and performing and organizing the festival and doing all this work as the chair of the Vancouver Classical Guitar Society. So, how do you manage your time to get all of these things just happening at once?
Um, with a lot of struggle. Yeah, it's definitely not easy, and there's like points in time where you really feel like you're failing at something because you kind of have to keep all these things sort of in rotation because you can't if you split yourself too much, you can't be effective at anything.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say that nowadays the event organizing has become a lot easier thanks to the other members of the Guitar Society here. So I'm really in debt to Valerie, our publicity director, and Wakako, our treasurer, and Veronica, who helps with the website, and
Mm-hmm.
Romulus, our other like bookkeeper, and Jason Park, and of course my colleague Luis Medina. So like it's been kind of a slow but very steady growth over the last few years,
Mm-hmm.
and it's given me like some freedom to get back into composition. Without them helping out with the Guitar Society, I either would have quit the Guitar Society by now, or I just wouldn't be doing the composing. So
Right.
yeah, I mean, you have to we have to be honest with ourselves about how much is it that we're capable of doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But like I said, also at the beginning, writing things down for me is like really important. I have like to-do lists and calendars, and if I find myself in a moment where I'm like, I know I should be productive right now, but I don't really know what to do, I just look at the list and then I just try to cross one thing off of it.
Right. That's a really effective strategy. Is there?
Yeah, I tell all my students the strategy, and I don't think any of them believe.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of the things where it's like the most obvious and most effective thing is just something that people just don't want to do.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is like I think being a professional in a lot of these ways, there's no big secrets here.
Hmm.
It's the really obvious things, but you just have to do it.
Yeah, yeah. Obvious but hard. Speaking of which, health is one of those things that's kind of obvious and hard too. And you mentioned a little bit earlier. So, is there anything that you do to keep physically fit and healthy over that long span that you talked about?
Physically fit. Well, diet I think is really, really important. I think diet is a bigger part of our health than exercise, but
Hmm.
I do try to exercise too. Um, so I'm really lucky in the past. I had someone I was living with that was a really amazing cook and helped me out a lot with that. I just most of healthy diet is just knowing what not to eat, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, just be honest with what to avoid, and you're already on a good pace.
Hmm.
I used to do a lot of weightlifting, not like necessarily really trying to like lift super heavy or
Yeah.
anything like that, but I think like some kind of regular resistance training is really helpful. And then now that I'm getting a bit older, I still do that, but I put longer breaks in between, and
Hmm.
things like cardio and mobility are more important. So like I do a dance class once a week,
Oh yeah,
and
nice.
yeah, and maybe do some yoga in the morning just lightly, or go for a run.
Hmm.
Yeah, just trying to do like a little bit, and being okay with like maybe just 15 minutes is fine. And also, in our day-to-day life, like there's a lot of ways we can engage ourselves and be more active. So just like when we're eating dinner, to have like nice posture and sit
Hmm.
up, like all those things that like your mom told you to
Yeah,
do when you
yeah.
were a kid. Yeah, and you try to like resist. Like actually, there's a reason why your parents were telling you to do that,
Hmm.
and it pays off a lot. So
That's right. Yeah, more to the list of yeah, it's obvious, but do it.
yeah.
Uh, are there any physical warm-ups and things that you do before you play guitar that are maybe outside of the guitar? So, like maybe like larger body movements or physical dynamic stretches that you do before you sit down and play?
Oh, sure. I do. I mean, I think just a few squats are really good because it just gets like the body pumping,
Hmm.
and our legs are such like a powerhouse for our bodies. So
Hmm.
if you have any kind of like background in sports or anything at all, you'll know like that feeling,
Yeah.
and I think that's great. Stretches. Now as I get older, I realize more and more like mobility in the shoulders is a really important thing. So we have all, I shouldn't say all of us, but if you're a guitarist for sure, we have this lifestyle of sitting down a lot and
Hmm.
typing on computers and driving, and we don't really get to use like this range of motion in our shoulders, and it translates into our playing. We can feel stiff, and sometimes I watch videos of me playing. I'm like, oh yeah, like I can see, like
Right.
I'm stiff around the neck and shoulders. So I started working on that a lot more, and it helps a lot.
Hmm.
So I definitely recommend uh, that to anyone who's young now to try to work on that so that you don't have to suffer with it when you get to be in your 30s and 40s and 50s.
Great. Yeah, I think Dale said the same thing, especially about the squads. That was a big thing for her too.
Yeah, what about you? Do you do any exercise?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do a lot of calisthenic stuff. So like handstands and push-ups and chin-ups and all these kinds of like weird gymnast acrobatic hold things. So get
Yeah,
that
those
get
are
that.
great because you can take it with you wherever you go,
Yeah,
right? So I'm
exactly.
a big fan of that.
Hmm. So about the Canadian classical guitar scene, I'm curious about what your thoughts are. Maybe about the BC area specifically, and maybe Calgary and beyond, and some of the other places that you've lived as well. What are your thoughts about the classical guitar scene?
Um, so uh I think it's really a healthy scene because we look at we're kind of in a time where a lot of classical music is sort of struggling,
Hmm.
and a lot of like bigger, especially less so in Canada, but in the States we see like a lot of big symphonies and orchestras, they're like losing funding and they're having to make cuts. And to contrast that, classical guitar, at least in the cities that I'm familiar with, it's really kind of been this like sort of grassroots effort. There's not a lot of support from government
Hmm.
or corporations or anything pulling it up. It's like people coming from
Yeah, yeah.
underneath and kind of boosting it up. And I think that's like, we're kind of a role model for what other instruments should be doing in that way. So I see in Vancouver, the audience is always slowly and steadily growing. And from my contacts in Calgary, I think it's the same thing there. I'm a little bit removed now from Montreal, even though I was there for 4 years, so I don't really know. Know better than me what the scene is like there. But yeah, I think it's pretty healthy, and we have this amateur world in the classical guitar that is really precious, and all these like adult learners and older folks who just love guitar so much, and it's like a part of their life that is in a way that's like really unique and special. And yeah, I think there's a bright future for guitar in
Hmm.
Canada.
Yeah. And I think especially with all of the guitar societies and all the festivals and things like that, I think it really fosters this nice community. I feel like compared to some other instruments, classical guitar has always felt really, really close. Like everyone knows each other and everyone's supporting each other, trying to make it the best thing possible.
Yeah, I think maybe a part of that is like the nature of our instrument. Like, it's just so damn challenging,
Hmm.
and it just kind of humbles you to try to be great at it.
Yeah.
So, but and then I think because of that, it pulls people with that kind of
Yeah.
personality towards it, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, and we see so many young talent these days, like so much young talent that like I feel like when I was a teenager, we didn't have like Alan Lewis and those kind of
Hmm.
Sebastian Robles,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
this
yeah.
young player that are just like killing it, and they're so good and so amazing. And yeah, I think it's like the generation of performers now that are like my age or a little bit younger or a little bit older, they're really good. I think they're definitely, I mean, we should really, there's some really great performers in the generation before, and we kind of don't give them enough credit actually now. We like to think that we're like somehow more special. But in terms of just like this sort of widespread standard of,
Hmm.
I think it's at a level it's never been before,
Yeah.
and I think it's only going to go up from here.
Hmm. So I think that's a good transition into the guitar festivals. Um, Something for me that I really cherish the memory of is when I was just going into university. Like Daniel got me to go to the Castle Guitar Festival, and I think that like really solidified that like, yeah, this is a community that I want to be part of, and this is something that I want to do forever. Do you have any experiences like that yourself with guitar festivals when you were like participating in them as a student?
Yeah, well, I also went to the Caslo Guitar Festival first as a student, and then later on as a faculty member and volunteer organizer. So I had that same experience that you're talking about, and yeah, that town is just so warm and friendly,
Mm-hmm.
and they love music so much. Like it's a town of 1,000 people for people who don't know, and when you do a concert there, over 100 people show up. So imagine like just over 10% of your population coming out, and it's literally like fills the church.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, I had that same experience. Growing up just outside of Calgary, like the folks in the Guitar Society there were always really warm and inviting. I love the scene there a lot. And then in Vancouver too, it's like the same thing. So yeah, kind of everywhere you go, people are really warm and welcoming.
Yeah. And how important would you say that these kinds of events are for when you're a student or an early professional?
Yeah, I think it's super important. I think generally, I mean, there's some disciplines that I don't know anything about, but I would imagine that any kind of like discipline um, that you're a part of, if you can translate it somehow from being a student in the safe, closed space to out in the real world and kind of putting what you know to the test
Mm-hmm.
and getting that real world feedback is sort of like invaluable, right?
Yeah.
Like, where else are you going to get that experience? And it certainly helped me to practice being in front of an audience, practice talking to strangers, practice teaching people for one time in a master class,
Mm-hmm.
and also like thinking about, okay, how can I present myself to be communicate what I'm saying more clearly? How can I dress more professionally? Like, what can I do with my speech to try to hook people into the guitar? So yeah, super important experience.
Mm-hmm.
Festivals, uh, open stages like recitals, whatever kind of thing you can do.
Yeah. Now that you're on the other side of the fence, as the festival founder and organizer, um, what what are your thoughts about the festivals now? And I guess what made you want to start your own festival in the first place?
Yeah. So growing up, I had some family that lived in Kelowna, and I had some family. My grandparents on my father's side lived in Langley, and we would drive from Alberta to Langley,
Mm-hmm.
and often we would stop in Kelowna. And I just like from the time I was maybe in my undergrad or early on in my master's, I always had this idea of like having a festival in Kelowna because I love the landscape.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a very, very beautiful city, and you have all these great wineries around. And I just thought, like, guitar and wine go so well together.
Right.
Like my first guitar teacher in Calgary, he was a huge wine aficionado. And yeah, I just thought like this is so perfect. Someone has to do this.
Mm-hmm. Great. Did you have any challenges that you had to overcome when you were creating the festival and getting everything organized for it?
Well, it's the stuff that we talked about in the beginning, just like kind of knowing where to start is
Mm-hmm.
tricky, and funding is always an issue. The hardest thing about the festival is just getting people to commit to the accommodations. It's expensive to travel,
Mm-hmm.
and right now, I hear from a lot of people that just money is tight in a way that it hasn't always been.
Right.
So that's the main obstacle is finances. But you just keep trying. and hoping for the best. And I think also it's helped a lot that slowly some more locals in Kelowna are kind of coming out of the woodworks and interested in what we do. And you know, the festival has different components to it. So we have the master classes and the lectures, and then we have the concerts. And this year, well, last year we had a huge rise in participation from the first year.
Mhm.
So this year it looks like we'll still do better than the first year, but I'm not sure if we'll break the second year's numbers. But we also had a really big growth in the attendance in the concerts. So having this like different aspects, it's like, okay, if we're a little bit short on the participants, but we knock it out of the park with the concert
Mhm.
attendance, then it kind of balances out.
Right.
So I think you make yourself more resilient that way by offering different things and not just one thing
Mhm.
and trying to utilize your faculty in different ways. So
Great. And about the faculty, how did you decide on the faculty that you were gonna recruit for the festival?
that's a great question. Well, obviously, I'm part of it,
Mhm.
so
Easy choice.
yeah, easy choice there. Daniel, I picked because he was my teacher, and I just love his charisma.
Hmm.
He's just beloved by everyone. He's so fun to talk to and always has such a clear and like poignant take on things. And that translates so well into his teaching. So
Hmm.
I always just love watching him teach because it's nothing super like frilly or over the top, but it always feels so like valuable
Hmm.
and kind of to the point.
Right.
So I love him coming to the festival and kind of being a regular. And I think the audiences and participants get to know this guy and look forward to him coming out. I think Ileana is like another clear choice for faculty. She's not that far away. She's living in, between Calgary and Lethbridge,
Hmm.
and she's an amazing performer. And it just, even if she wasn't, I would have still brought her. But this year, she's working on this new project. You're going to talk to her as well, right?
Hmm.
So she'll talk more about that. But like, she has new pieces coming out. So I think it's just going to be like she just sent the program, and it's really interesting and unique. And it's going to be a really fun thing for us to publicize her
Hmm.
and this program that she's bringing. So it's great that she's joining. I also really love her teaching, and she's fun to be around as well. The cellist I'm working with, Philip Hansen. So he and a few other folks invited me out to a chamber music festival in Quadra Island.
Hmm.
And I did it last year, and they invited me again this year. And it last year it was really hard, like because I had this entire repertoire I prepared for Kelowna, and then like
Right.
an entire another set of
Hmm.
repertoire I prepared for Quadra on
That's hard.
top
Yeah.
of organizing the festival. Yeah, so by bringing him to Kelowna, I get to prepare a little bit less repertoire and really focus on um, bringing up the quality of what I do have. So we'll play a lot of the same stuff in Quadra Island that we're going to do in Kelowna. So that's like another kind of straightforward, obvious one. And then there's you and Austin and Josh and Carson coming out. And I got the email from Austin quite a while ago
Hmm.
about saying like, "Hey, Alec, like I have these arrangements, and I really want uh, to make these a reality. Like, would you like to play in this thing, or is there some like where can I perform these things?" And so Austin, he was a former student of mine as well. I feel a bit awkward saying that because like he came to study with Daniel, and I sort of took him over, and we only studied together for like 2 years, I
Hmm.
think. But he was such a brilliant student. Like he is so involved in theory, and he's such a sharp kid, and he has a lot of those soft skills that I was talking about. Like he's really quick to communicate, and he's organized, and he has a clear goal of like what it is that he's trying to
Hmm.
achieve. So I was always just super impressed with Austin as a student. So as a teacher and as an organizer of this festival, I thought like, you know, I have the power here to give a former student like a chance to kind of shine and show something that they've been working
Hmm.
on, and kind of, I think it's a nice responsibility to have, as we get older, to shine the light on the next people coming up. So
Hmm.
it was that choice was made because I saw this work, and I know what kind of effort he puts in. And then I told him, I don't have the time to play these pieces with you, but I'm gonna contact you with TJ. He's back from Montreal, and I know a few other people that maybe can help you out with that. And yeah, I'm really excited to see how it's all going to turn out.
Great. Okay. So we're just about out of time. So I will, I guess, open the floor up to some viewer questions. So I'll just ask you one more question to just let them accumulate in the chat. But I asked this to Luis the other week, but do you think that there's a certain level of guitar skill needed to benefit from participating in and watching these kinds of festivals? Or is it something that like everybody should go to? Or what are your thoughts on I guess the participants levels?
That's a interesting question. I would say you don't need any experience at all to benefit. I think the if you have some experience, you'll benefit more.
Hmm.
So just because it's like when anytime you learn anything, there's like a language around it, right?
Hmm.
So if you have a little bit of that language in your pocket, you're going to be able to absorb more. But if you're just starting out, if you've never played guitar at all, and this festival is going to be your first experience to guitar, you're not going to absorb as much as someone who's been playing guitar for a few years,
Hmm.
but you're going to learn a lot more of that language than if you were just sitting at home. Like if you didn't come to
Right.
the festival, you know what I
Exactly.
mean?
Yeah.
So, right? So there's the benefit for everyone.
Hmm.
And then of course there's always these benefits that aren't necessarily related to your actual playing or understanding of music. It's still like a social event. You're still
Hmm.
going to be around people. You're going to be meeting new people. There's going to be this kind of energy in the air, and the concerts are super fun, and the city is super beautiful. And yeah, so I think it's really for anyone to enjoy. And yeah,
Great.
come
Great.
on,
Yeah.
come out, guys.
That's right. July 4th to 7th for the Okanagan Festival.
That's right. OkanaganGuitar.com.
Yeah. Okay. So we have some viewer questions. What superpower would you want to have?
Oh man, what superpower? I guess like time travel is like super
Oh yeah,
broken.
yeah.
So I think that kind of trumps everything, right?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think so. Okay, another question. This one's from Instagram. What kind of things do you think that people can do to break out of the student sphere and into more the professional sphere?
Okay, this is a good question. Um, so let me kind of answer it in more than one way. So there's a few really practical things that you can do that I tell everyone to do, and like again, like
No one does
no one
it.
really does it.
Right.
Yeah, but just the very simple things that like if you look at any kind of professional, you can take like a survey of what do all these professionals have, and then like if you want to be a professional, you need to have those things, right? So like you need to have a bio, and if it's not a bio, like if you don't have anything to put on your biography, you can tell an artist story, right? So
Hmm.
what made you get involved in the guitar? What is it about you love? So you need some kind of writing that you can put onto a website, and you need a website, and you need some pictures. It's better to have videos as well than just pictures. But those three things, like a bio, a website, and some pictures, anyone can have those things. Like
Hmm.
a website's very affordable. And I tell all the students, just get one now as a student, and you can build it up over time. And it's way better than like, okay, now I'm graduated, now I need a job. Like now I have to do this thing. It's better
Right.
you build it up over time. And even if you're gonna be like teaching at a school or something that they don't require you to have a website, like if I'm hiring and I'm looking at 10 different guitarists, and only half of them have websites. Like, I'm going to be more interested in the people that are trying to make themselves more visible and well
Mm-hmm.
known, right? And I guess along with the websites, you could say like social media or whatever too. But those are just like simple, like very practical things
Mm-hmm.
that can help propel you into the professional space. Another one is just adding yourself to Google Maps. So I don't know why like people don't think to do that, but it's very easy to do. And you we have to be like visible as professionals, right?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't if we're like amazing musicians, but we're just sitting in the basement practicing all day and no one sees us, that's that is not going to help us out
Right.
financially,
Mm-hmm.
right? So and I think what you're doing here with this is really great. So my other recommendation would be to think about what you can do that sets you apart from your peers. And it's not always like being the best musician technically, and you're going to win compositions or competitions.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, you don't have to be a competition winner to be an interesting professional. And sometimes we have professionals who are really amazing players, but you sit down to have a lesson with them and they're just like not really interesting people,
Right.
or us outside of the stage they're just not really that interesting. Of course, mostly they're very passionate people, and they are, but it can go either way. So I think looking at the space and thinking, okay, what is something that people aren't doing right now that I could be doing? So like this, what you're doing with your Twitch stream is super cool and interesting. And then the last thing, so those are kind of, I would put the first, it's like a package, just
Yeah.
obvious, do what every professional needs to do. Then what can I do that's different from the people around me? And then the third thing is to be as collaborative as possible,
Mm-hmm.
and to not be afraid to collaborate with people outside of your comfort zone. So whether that's maybe like instruments that you're not used to working with, like other people, or I think it's really great when people can kind of step outside of their genre a little bit. If you're a performer, I'm not really great at this, but if you're a performer who is, fluent in more than one genre,
Mm-hmm.
that's always really interesting to me. And I think audiences also really like it. And you kind of have to think like your audience is like this bubble, and this is what people hear, and then you have a whole bunch of bubbles. So how much can you make your bubble overlap with
Right.
other people's bubbles,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah. That's a wonderful answer. Okay, we have a couple more questions. If you could go back in time, what instrument would you want to play?
Ah, guitar is still really up there. I really love the sound of the cello.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is like a cliche thing I hear a lot of guitarists say. So maybe I would have picked up the cello. And last year I worked with a harp player, and I have to say, harp is pretty cool. Now, I don't know if I'd want that one because it's like carrying around a harp
It's
is
hard.
kind of yeah. And she had to like have her whole family help her move the harp
Yeah.
in this van and stuff. But man, that instrument is super interesting and super beautiful
Mm-hmm.
sounding, and the level of virtuosity that you can do on a harp is like super interesting too. But I think guitar is a great choice, and yeah, maybe cello would have been fun.
Great. All right. Well, I think that's just about it. So, to round things off, is there anything else that you wanted to say before we called it a day?
No, I will say if you're watching this and you're in the Vancouver area, I'll also be giving a concert June 22nd at the Vancouver Academy of Music. The information for that will be going up on the Guitar Society website later today. So check it out. That'll be fun. Yeah, and then here's another like piece of advice that is good for students and also just like amateurs or enthusiasts who love guitar. Everyone is more accessible than you think they are.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's someone that's doing something that's interesting to you, just write them an email or send them a message on social media. And if they don't respond, try again or try a different path. And everyone is always like, I found everyone is really happy to talk to you. And people like to kind of be looked at as someone who's like a source of information
Mm-hmm.
or whatever. So yeah, everyone is more accessible than you think they are, and don't be shy.
Great. Wonderful. Well, The Okanagan Guitar Festival, just to remind everyone, is July 4th to 7th at the UBC Okanagan campus. And then we have the Vancouver Guitar Festival, 11th to 14th at Capilano University. And both of them are still in early bird discount mode. So before June 7th, you can still get your discounts. And you can go to vancouverguitar.org to find out more about those. And also, the concert Alec will be giving on June 22nd will be there as well. So go check it out. And yeah, thank you so much for being on the show. It was great having you, and I look forward to seeing you play and working with you at the festivals coming up.
Great. It was a lot of fun for me too. Thanks for putting this together.
Yeah, take care.
You too.